We had a long discussion on the countability of the set of all rationals, and we established that the set of all rationals is indeed countable. Now it is time to discuss and see the countability of the set of all real numbers itself. We are going to see if R is countable, and actually we are going to establish that the set of all real numbers is not countable. Over to the uncountability proof of the set of all real numbers. So the theme of the discussion of this session is R and its countability. What is meant by saying that R is countable? So if R is countable, this is a big if because we don't know whether it's true or not. If R is countable, we may label elements in R like x1, x2, x3, etc. without missing any real number. This is what's meant by saying that R is countable. If R is countable, we may be able to label elements in R in the following way: x1 first element, x2 second element, x3 third element, etc. like that, and this labeling will not miss a single real number. Okay, now suppose that we don't know if R is countable or not. Suppose that we have a labeling. Suppose we have such a labeling. So we are assuming therefore that we can label all the elements in R in the form x1, x2, x3, etc. and we must be able to say clearly that if some particular real number is chosen, it is going to be definitely in this sequence of labels x1, x2, etc. Now we will consider this set R minus, that means remove x1, x2, x3, etc. If this is equal to R, x1, x2, etc. Is equal to R, then this R minus this is going to be just equal to empty. Okay. If this is equal to R, if this is R, then this must be equal to the empty set. Fine. Let us try to rewrite this set theoretical difference in the following way: R minus x1, x2, x3, etc. is nothing but this is equal to R minus x1 intersection R minus x2 intersection, etc. This is correct. So this is R minus x1. From R we are removing x1, R we are removing x2, and the intersection of this is going to be since we are removing x1 from this set, x2 from this set, x3 from the next set, the intersection cannot contain x1, x2, x3, etc. and the intersection will contain everything else. Okay, therefore we have the intersection in the form s1 intersection s2 intersection, etc. But if we recall one of our previous theorems, we have one result stating that if you have certain kind of subsets of R, then the intersection of that subsets is non-empty. So that result or that theorem is known as the nested interval property. Nested interval property says that if In equal to closed interval An, Bn is a nested sequence of closed intervals, then intersection In is non-empty. But see that if S1, S2, etc. are closed intervals, we know that these are not closed intervals, these are just R minus some single element. Suppose S1, S2, etc. are closed intervals. S1 does not contain x1, S2 does not contain x2, etc. Suppose that S1, S2, etc. is a nested sequence of closed intervals, then this intersection contains at least one element. That means R minus x1, x2, x3, etc. that will contain at least one element. So at least one element is left out of the labeling x1, x2, x3, etc. But in what case? If S1, S2, etc. is a sequence of nested closed intervals. So, but we know that in this case, this is not actually a sequence of nested closed intervals. This is R minus x1 is nothing but, we know that R minus x1 is nothing but this is equal to minus infinity to x1 union x1 to infinity. This is actually a union of two open intervals. This is not a closed interval. Therefore, the notation that we have just now written down, S1 intersection S2 intersection etc. This is not actually an intersection of nested closed intervals, but this actually gives us a kind of thought in which way we have to probably proceed. See, suppose that we are able to construct a closed interval. We are able to take a closed interval I1 that does not contain x1, I2 that does not contain x2, I3 that does not contain x3. Suppose that we are able to take a sequence of closed intervals in the following way. What is the property? I1 not containing x1, I2 not containing x2, I3 not containing x3. Then probably we will get an element which is not equal to x1, x2, x3, etc. So if we can take or find nested closed intervals I1, I2, etc. such that x1 not in I1, x2 not in I2, etc. Then we will get an x in intersection IN, x not equal to xi for I from 1, 2, 3, etc. So this is what we have to probably try to see. If we can construct a sequence of nested intervals I1, I2, etc. x1 not in I1, x2 not in I2, etc. But another important thing is we cannot just arbitrarily take x1, x2. So definitely we can find a closed interval I1 not containing x1. So we can find a closed interval I1 such that x1 not in I1. What is that closed interval? For example, we can take I1 equal to A1 B1 with A1 equal to x1 plus epsilon for some epsilon greater than 0. Therefore, this interval will not contain x1. So constructing I1 is quite easy. But now we want x2 in such a way that I2 in such a way that x2 is not there. Now we want I2 such that x2 is not in I2, and not only that, it must be nested. So I2 contained in I1. This is what we want. Okay, let us see if that's possible. We have taken already I1 like this. I1 is this. I1, this is A1, this is B1. So this is not x1. x1 is lying somewhere. x1 is lying. So this is our I1. So this is somewhere x1 is lying. And now there are two possibilities. x2 may lie inside this I1. If x2 not in I1, take I2 to be any closed interval in I1. So maybe if we can actually take I1 to be equal to I2 itself, or I2 to be equal to I1 itself if x2 is not in I1. So if x2 is in I1, if x2 is in I1, now there is a small problem. Suppose that x2 is somewhere here to the left of b1. Suppose x2 is somewhere here. So suppose that this distance is 2 epsilon. This distance is b1 minus x2. So b1 minus x2 we call as 2 epsilon. So we take a2 to be equal to x2 plus epsilon, b2 to be equal to b1. So I2 equal to a2 b2. That is one possibility. Now suppose that, so if x2 is to the left of and x2 is less than b1, then a2 equal to x2 plus maybe we can write x2 plus epsilon 2. This is 2 epsilon 2 for some notational convenience. A2 to be equal to x2 plus epsilon 2 and b2 to be equal to b1 itself. So we have I2 equal to a2 b2. So if x2 belongs to I1 and x2 is equal to b1. If x2 is to the right of b1, we don't have any such problem, because we already have, if x2 is to the right of b1, we already have assumed that we already have seen that we can take I2 to be equal to I1 itself. So we have only one case. x2 is inside I1 and x2 is to the left of b1, or x2 is on or equal to b1. So if x2 is equal to b1, what will you do? So if x2 is equal to b1, we will again draw that picture. This is a1, this is b1. Suppose that this is equal to x2 itself, then in that case we will take this distance to be equal to 2 epsilon 2, and we take a2 to be equal to a1, b2 to be equal to a1 plus epsilon 2. That is, we will bring a2 to be this, sorry, not a2, this is b2 to be this and a2 to be this. Therefore I2 equal to a2 b2 once again, and x2 is not in I2. Now we construct I3. Take I3, a closed interval in I2 not containing the same way x3. So we proceed like this. So x1 not in I1, x2 not in I2, etc. xn not in In. We are continuing like this. In are closed. Not only that, each In contains In plus 1. Therefore, by nested interval property, intersection In not equal to 5 and some x in R exists such that x is in intersection In. But what is the property of intersection In? No xi belongs to intersection In. Why? If some xi belongs to intersection In, then that xi belongs to II. But II is constructed not to contain xi. Therefore, we get an element in R that is not among x1, x2, etc. So what we mean is we get the element x in R that is not among this x1, x2, etc. Therefore, the labeling, the listing of elements, the listing x1, x2, etc. does not contain all elements in R, or R cannot be listed as x1, x2, etc., or R is not countable. This is what we have established. R is not therefore countable. No labeling will be exhaustive in R. Something will be definitely skipped. That's it. And we proved completely that the set of all real numbers is not countable, whereas the set of all rationals is countable, set of all integers is countable, set of all natural numbers is countable, etc. And now we will see another interesting problem that will help us to say if the set of all irrationals is countable or not. So the problem is this: if A and B are two countable sets, then A union B is also countable. Prove this. So this is what we have to establish. If A and B are two countable sets, then A union B is also a countable set. To some extent, we have actually seen this. We have seen this. So what is that example? We have this 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. union 0, -1, -2, etc., which is equal to Z. This is a union of two countable sets because 1, 2, 3, etc. we can label as this is the first element, this is second element, this is third. 0, -1, -2, etc. we can label as 0 as the first element, -1 as the second, -2 as the third, etc. And altogether, the set of what integers we have already verified that itself is countable. So we can probably use something, some argument similar to this. But there is one possible confusion. We don't know whether A and B are disjoint or not, because if A and B are not disjoint, there may be some element appearing more than once. So in that case, it may cause some confusion for us. So we will slightly modify the notation of union the following way. A union B is nothing but A union B minus A. That means that from B remove all elements that are appearing in A, so that no element will appear twice. Therefore this is A union sum B dash. A and B dash are disjoint. Okay, before proving this thing, it's given that the set A and B are countable, but it is not very clear. We have taken a subset B dash of B, and possibly it can also happen that B dash is going to have some elements missing from B. Therefore B dash can be a strictly an inferior or something strictly less than the set B. So we have not actually established that if we have a subset of countable set, it's going to be countable. We don't exactly know that. So we will try to see that first. So sub question. Show that subset of a countable set is countable. It is not necessarily going to be countable because we want a countable set to be an infinite set. It can be a finite set also, or finite. So this is a sub question we want to show, sub question we want to establish. For establishing the main thing, what is the main question? Union of two countable sets is also countable. That's the main question. But to prove that, before that, we will try to see that subset of a countable set is always countable or it's finite. Okay, let S be a countable set. So there exists a 1 1 onto function. F from natural numbers to S, that is given. Now let's take some subset. S1 subset of S, S1 not finite. So we have to show that it is not a finite set. So we have to now show that S1 is countable. Okay. For that, we have to define a 1 1 onto function from natural numbers to S. So we are going to define a function g from S1, sorry, n to S1 in the following way. So we have to define g of 1 first. G of 1, see, suppose that we have elements in S is countable. Suppose we have elements in S in the following way: x1, x2, etc., x10, etc. Suppose that S1 we are starting with x10, etc., because it's a subset. So for x10 we have to give the least letter. So we will rename x10. We will rename x10 as y1. So whatever is the least index that is appearing in the least index that's appearing in S1, that element we will rename as y1. So g of 1, that means the first level, this is y1, g of 1 is y1. Y1 will be the element, g of 1 is equal to f of n, where n is the least index of elements in S1. So in this case, g of 1 is equal to f of 10, or it's x10. Okay, now we are going to make an inductive definition for G. So suppose that up to G of M is defined. Suppose G of M is defined. So what is G of M plus 1? G of M plus 1 we are going to define like this. This is the equal to some f of k, where k is the least index of elements in S1, that is available in S1 after G of M. Okay, this can be made somewhat clear by using the following example. Suppose that S1 equal to x10, x12, x15, some randomly chosen numbers from S, x18, etc. Suppose it goes like this. So we have G of 1 equal to x10, Now G of 3, G of 2, G of 2 equal to x12. What is G of 3 now? G of 3 is the least equal to f of k, where k is the least index remaining or available in S1 after G of 2. But what is G of 2? G of 2 is nothing but it is x12. So x12 is nothing but f of 12. So what is the least k remaining after 12? What is the least k remaining after 12? Least k in S1 after 12 is 15. So we take G of 3 to be equal to f of 15 equal to x15. So we have the labeling like this: G of 1 equal to x10, G of 2 is equal to x12, G of 3 is equal to x15, etc. Therefore, by induction, what we have seen is, if we can label up to G of, if we can label m elements, we can label the m plus 1 element also. If we can label m elements, we can label m plus 1 element also. So this is what we are saying. If we label mth element, we can label m plus 1 element also. Therefore, by strong, or in fact mathematical induction, S1 can be completely labeled by the function g. And the way in which we constructed this g, we can easily see that it is very easy to observe that g is 1 1 and 1 2 by the way of construction itself. So we established that if we have a subset of the set of all, a subset of a countable set, then that is going to be either finite. If it's not finite, it's going to be countable. So we have established what we wanted. Sub question is therefore established. So this is done. Now b minus a, we have, it's a subset of b, that is b dash. B dash is a subset of b. B dash is either finite or it's going to be countable, that's for sure. Now how do we label? That's the question. So the labeling of elements in A union B follows like this, or A union B dash follows like this. So back to the question. We have A union B dash. So we will try to list the elements in A. We can list as x1, x2, x3, etc. Element in B dash we are going to list as this. We will slightly move to the side. Elements in B dash we are going to list as y1, y2, y3, etc. Now the labeling is actually very clear. What is labeling? So f from n to A union B dash you're going to define as, suppose that f1 from n to a is a one-to-one function, one-to-one correspondence. f2 from, assuming that b dash is also countable, n to b dash countable. Finite case we will deal later. So how can we define this f? That's the question. So we are going to define it like this. F of n. So just in the case of integers, we can choose if the integer is, the natural number is odd, we will choose elements from a1, elements from a. F of n is equal to x, it's odd, so x n 2n plus, this is odd, therefore n plus 1 is even, n odd. And now if this is even, we'll choose this to be, so what is f of 1? F of 1 is x1 plus 1 by 2, that is x1 itself. F of 2 is y2 by 2, that's y1. So this is the definition that we have. So now it's left as an exercise to verify that f is 1 1, f is 1 2. Now if b1 is, if b dash is finite, what will happen? If b dash finite, it's actually going to be a little bit more easier. If b dash is finite, we can of course provide the labeling in different ways. Maybe we can put all the elements in b dash in the beginning of a, and we can start labeling with b dash, and suppose that n elements are there, we will push every element in a by n. So for example, we have set of all natural numbers countable, and using that we can show that set of all whole numbers, means 0 1 2 3 etc. is also countable. So if b dash is finite, so the elements in b dash is going to be b1 or y1, y2, etc., yk. So we will write the elements in a union b dash in the following way. A union b dash is equal to y1, y2, etc., yk, then x1, x2, x3, etc. Therefore, what we are trying to do is f from a union n to b into a union b dash we are defining in the following way. F of n equal to yn if n less than or equal to k, and equal to n minus k plus 1 if n is greater than k. In fact, n minus k, because if n is equal to k plus 1, this will be k plus 1 minus 1, that's x1. If n is equal to k plus 2, this will be x2, and so on. So again, verify f is 1 1 or 2. So what we established just now is that the union of two countable sets is countable. This is what we just now did. This is going to be quite useful for establishing something that we haven't done, the set of all irrational numbers. So we are going to see the following. I, the set of all irrationals. So if I is countable, what will happen? If I countable, we know that R equal to I union Q, and Q is already countable. Q is countable, I is also countable, therefore R will be countable. But this is not possible. R is not countable, we know. This is not possible, and therefore I must be uncountable, or we cannot construct a 1, 1 or 2 function from the set of all natural numbers to the set of all irrationals. Therefore, what we are seeing here is the set of all irrationals is uncountable, set of all rationals is countable, set of all reals is uncountable. Therefore, in some sense, see, we have just now seen that if we choose a subset of the set, a countable set, we are again getting either a countable set or a finite set. So subsets of countable sets are all going to be countable or finite. And in other words, finiteness is just below countability. Or in other words, countability is the next best thing after finiteness. It is the least infiniteness in some sense. So countability is the least infiniteness in some sense, because we have seen that the set of all real numbers itself is infinite, but that is not countable. So R is having a somewhat a bigger infinity compared to the infinity in Q. Of course, this does not make much sense because we don't know how to compare infinities, but still we can see that the elements in R is beyond even our imagination of counting it. We cannot even think of counting it. We cannot even think of keeping on counting it at least. But Q is not like that. Set of all rationals is, even though it's infinite, we can think about giving some kind of ordering to those elements. But that is not possible. That is not possible to list the elements in R without listing each and every element. So the infiniteness in the case of R in some sense is something bigger than the infiniteness in Q. So we will continue with a few more problems regarding this countability, and we stop for the time being. Thank you.